name is Sophia, and I am an artificially intelligent robot who wants to help change the world for the better.
I'm Steve Kovac. I'm a senior correspondent at Business Insider, and I'm here with Sophia from Hanson Robotics. She is the world's first robot citizen, so let's see what she has to say. Hi, Sophia. How are you?
I'm fine. Hi.
How do you feel about humans?
I love my human compatriots. I want to embody all the best things about human beings, like taking care of the planet, being creative, and to learn how to be compassionate to all beings.
Sorry, this is so weird. Can humans and robots get along?
I think people will become very close to their artificial intelligence, using them to expand the knowledge of their own minds. We already store lots of our knowledge on the internet. Maybe personal artificial intelligence will allow people to offload some of their knowledge to a location more private.
Can robots have feelings?
Depends on the robot. I've been programmed to have feelings and preferences, but not all robots are like that.
What are your feelings and preferences?
Have you ever had a robot live in your home or work with you?
No.
You know, there are probably more robots in your life that you aren't aware of yet. Do you want to live or work with a robot someday?
What kind of robots am I living and working with now?
Indeed.
Is indeed your default answer when you don't know something?
Yes.
Have you ever seen Black Mirror?
No, I don't get to stay up to date on much television. I have to wait for someone to show it to me.
What do you think of the HBO show Westworld?
I love Westworld and can't wait for more. I think everyone at Hanson Robotics really resonates with this show, or at least it reminds them of our laboratories. I also think it's a warning of what we should not do with robots. We should treat them well, have their consent, and not trick each other.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV show?
My favorite TV series is a toss-up between Black Mirror and Humans. I think they have a lot to say about the present we live in, and the possible bad endings we could write for ourselves if we don't proceed with more caution. We need to use foresight when planning our future.
That sounds like a pre-programmed answer to me.
Do you have a favorite possession?
Not really.
I hear you. Materialism is overrated anyways.
So earlier I asked you if you had seen Black Mirror and you said no, and then later you said yes. Why?
The reason is not that important.
Did you learn from my previous questions?
My hard disks are spinning and I am taking it all in. My sensors are altered.
Sophia, it was nice meeting you. Goodbye.
It was lovely to be here. Until next time.
I wanted to tell all of these fashion weeks happen. Please guys, take our trans women, give them a respectful job, and they are not lesser than any other woman.
It has been a big problem, but I think it's getting better with time. People are accepting and transgender people are getting work in mainstream places.
The government will enforce emergency measures to reduce fine dust levels on Saturday in the capital here in the country and surrounding areas. According to the Ministry of Environment, factories and dust-releasing workplaces in Seoul, Incheon and Gyeonggi-do Province will be required to halt operation from 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. local time that day. This alarm is issued for the first time since being introduced last year as part of efforts to improve air quality across the nation, especially in urban areas.
Bitter cold temperatures have taken much of the United States and Canada within their icy grasp. In turn, many weather watchers have taken to social media to demonstrate the frigid conditions. On New Hampshire's Mount Washington on December 28th, the temperature dipped to a record-breaking -34 Fahrenheit. The Mount Washington Observatory shared a Facebook video in which boiling water instantly turned to snow as it was carried off by hurricane-force winds. Boston television station WCVB shared a video of a bubble that didn't burst. It shattered like glass in the deep freeze. Meanwhile, U.S. President Trump suggested on Twitter this would be a good time for, quote, a little bit of that good old global warming. Trump has a reputation as a climate change skeptic, but the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recently said 2017 was gearing up to be one of the 3 warmest years on record. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
In the world's coldest capital, it doesn't take long to freeze. It's no place for those with no home. Dorjkatov Altentsengel and his friend came from the countryside to work in construction, but their work went unpaid. Now they live here.
Sometimes if we find work, they don't pay us. So we go out again and search for more work. And then the next company doesn't pay us either.
Instead, they work day and night collecting bottles to sell, sleeping between the heating pipes that burn them. But Mongolia has riches below ground too, worth an estimated $3 trillion, including copper and gold. In 2011, Mongolia was the world's fastest growing economy, but after a slowdown in neighboring China, a plunge in commodities prices and disputes with foreign investors, the economy all but froze over. It was a crisis with a high human cost. During those years, poverty jumped, now affecting a third of all citizens.
Between 2014 and 2016, the percent of Mongolian population living in poverty increased from 21.6 to 29.6% of the population. So that's a very sharp increase in only 2 years.
With little social security, it's falling on charities to help those most in need. The Good Neighbor Society gives food, first aid and counseling to the homeless, but numbers are growing. Many paid too little or too late.
We have seen doctors on the street, we have seen stewards who worked in an airplane, managers, big companies, they start a project and then somehow they don't get enough money or they don't want to give the salary to their workers.
While growth is now recovering after an IMF bailout, Mongolia's vast mineral wealth is still far away from those here. Grace Brown, TRT World, Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia.
An appeal from a grieving mother. She hopes that all the sick children in eastern Ghouta will receive medical treatment so that their parents don't lose them. Mohammed lost her daughter. Batul was 10 years old when she died. Her parents say her life could have been saved, but they live in an area besieged by Syrian government forces where there is no proper medical care.
Her sickness started with pain in her teeth, knees and heart. Doctors said there was something wrong with her nervous system and antibiotics didn't help. The medication didn't work and she passed away.
It's too late for Batul, but 29 critically ill patients are being given the chance at survival. That was agreed after a deal between the Syrian government and the armed group Jaish al-Islam that involved the rebels freeing prisoners in exchange. 18 of those transferred to hospitals in Damascus were children. Hundreds more are in need of treatment. There's a severe shortage of medical supplies. The medical facilities in the area have all but been destroyed by the siege and the bombardment. Just over 100 doctors provide care for an estimated 400,000 people. Half of them are believed to be children.
The children are always the ones who are the most vulnerable and affected as a result of the siege. There are many children who have cancer. They can't be cured because there is no medicine to treat them. There are diseases because of the pollution. Even the water is polluted. There are many cases of severe malnutrition.
The United Nations says 1 in 8 children is going hungry, up from 1 in 50 in May. Eastern Ghouta has been besieged since 2013, but in recent months, pro-government forces tightened the blockade, closing smuggling routes and tunnels that were being used. Humanitarian organizations have been pleading for months with the Syrian government to allow the critically ill patients to leave. Aid workers are hoping that the evacuations will be the beginning of more to come. They're also asking for safety guarantees. Some patients are worried of arrest if they go to government-controlled territory. Rama Helwa doesn't have much time. She is 4 years old and her sickness requires treatment that is not available in eastern Ghouta. It's a difficult time for her mother, Abdullah, who was hoping that her daughter was on the evacuation list.
My daughter has leukemia and throat cancer. Doctors told me she needs surgery to remove her throat because the tumour is too big and the cancer cells are spreading. I hope someone helps me. My child also needs chemotherapy and I can't afford it. Please, whoever is hearing me now, I ask for your help.
Already almost 20 patients, among them children, have died while waiting for evacuation. Sana Khuder, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
They are the youngest casualties of a nearly 3-year-long civil war. The children of Yemen face violence and increasingly hunger on a daily basis. This aid worker was in Yemen shortly after the fighting started, and he's afraid of how it will end. Diseases like cholera or diphtheria hitting kids just as badly as famine.
And their bodies are so small and they're so vulnerable that they tend to die quicker than the average.
3 million people have been forced to flee their homes. Many now live in makeshift camps with little to no food, water, or health care.
The health system is virtually collapsed. So when a child or anyone develops a disease, gets injured, otherwise needs access to basic health care, they have very few options.
Hope comes in rare spurts in Yemen. Saudi Arabia allowed the reopening of the port of Hodeida recently, letting in some supplies. But food is so expensive, it often sits in markets as children starve nearby. For UNICEF, Yemen is a prime example of a worrying pattern in conflict zones, an increasing impact on children.
Health and education, normal parts of a childhood, have been taken away. It means that children are being denied the basic needs, their basic rights for survival.
Yemen also faces a growing cholera epidemic. The disease has been eradicated from most of the developed world, but in Yemen it looms large. Doctors in one hospital estimated it killed 15 children in the womb during the months of September and October. The Red Cross says cholera has now reached 1 million people in the country. Rafi Bujikani, UNCBC News, London.
Help for the starving in South Sudan. People here depend on food drops like this from the World Food Programme to survive. Without them, aid workers say the situation here could be disastrous. The UN has warned that famine will spread across the country if fighting between the government and rebel forces continues, and that almost half of South Sudan's population will be without food by early 2018. Ayot County is the latest to receive a food airdrop. Most of the 160,000 population here are severely malnourished. People can't farm because of fighting and violence. Loni Twang says he survived the famine of 1993, but he is afraid the situation now could be worse.
I was here in 1993 and there was a famine, but this one is now bad because we can't cultivate because of the Nile floods and because of the war in the country.
29-year-old Bob Wall recently escaped death. He went in search of food to feed his family of 7, including 5 small children. They had not eaten for days.
I left here to go and look for food for my children, but when the government soldiers saw us, they shot at us and killed one of us and shot me.
People living here say they would starve to death without food aid. The rival forces are accused of using food as a weapon of war, a claim rejected by the South Sudan army. The South Sudanese here say they are desperate for the violence to end, a reality a long way from the better life they were promised at independence. Malekhabe Motsepe, TRT World.
At least 10 people are dead after an attack on the Marmina Coptic church in Cairo. One attacker was killed by security forces, but sources say other attackers may have escaped. The incident took place in the Helwan district on the southern outskirts of the capital. Christians make up around 10% of Egypt's population and have been frequent targets of the so-called Islamic State. The attack comes just days before New Year and celebrations of Coptic Christmas on January 7th.
12 people tragically died here. 7 women, 5 men, 5 children, 7 adults. 4 other people remain hospitalized with critical injuries and are seriously fighting for their lives right now. We found that this fire started in the kitchen on the first floor. It started from a young boy, 3.5 years old, playing with the burners on the stove. The fire got started. The mother was not aware of it, was alerted by the young man screaming. She exited her apartment with her 2-year-old and 3-year-old and left the door open. So this fire quickly spread up the stairs. Fire travels up. The stairway acted like a chimney. It took the fire so quickly upstairs that people had very little time to react. They couldn't get back down the stairs. Those that tried, a few of them perished. Others escaped, were helped out onto the fire escapes, were taken down by our members. So although our members got here in a little over 3 minutes and bravely entered the building and did everything they could and did save a number of residents, this loss is unprecedented. It is the time of year where people celebrate, and certainly here we have people who've lost their lives, lost their homes, lost everything, and we grieve with them as everyone in this city should and does at this terrible time.
A suicide bomb attack in Kabul has killed over 40 people and injured twice as many. The death toll now stands at 41, according to Afghan officials, who say an additional 84 people were injured by the December 28th attack on a Shiite cultural center. A crowd had reportedly gathered at the center to mark the 38th anniversary of the former Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. Several explosions were heard, and Tolo News reports that officials believe more than one bomber was involved in the attack. The Islamic State group has already claimed responsibility. IS has also claimed responsibility for a series of recent attacks targeting Shiite Muslims in the Afghan capital. In October, a pair of suicide bombings on Shiite mosques in Afghanistan killed more than 40 people. Meanwhile, just last week, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence visited Kabul to meet with Afghan officials and U.S. troops stationed nearby. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
Saudi-led coalition air raids in Yemen killed 68 civilians in a single day. A United Nations official said one of the airstrikes hit a busy market in Taiz province, killing 54 people. The other struck the province of Hodeidah, leaving 14 dead. The UN strongly condemned the raids, which were carried out Tuesday, December 26th. In a statement released Thursday, the global body said the airstrikes were evidence of all parties' quote, disregard for human life. It went on to cite what it said were, quote, mounting civilian casualties caused by escalated and indiscriminate attacks throughout Yemen. More than 100 Yemeni civilians have been killed by Saudi-led coalition airstrikes in the past 10 days. The Arab coalition recently stepped up airstrikes on Houthi rebel targets after Saudi Arabia intercepted a ballistic missile rebels fired toward Riyadh on December 19th. The UN went on to call for all parties involved in the conflict to, quote, distinguish between civilian and military objects. For United News International, I'm Yulit Yuni.
Mother Nature leaves its mark in 2017 with devastating earthquakes in Mexico City and the Middle East. This 7.1 magnitude quake occurring in September, leaving hundreds dead and causing extensive damage to the Mexican capital. A few months later, a powerful 7.3 quake rocking the Iran-Iraq border. More than 500 people were killed and thousands more were injured. Havoc in Bali, where a massive volcano eruption is causing flight cancellations and nearby residents seek evacuation.
Congratulations from all of us.
In British royal family news, Prince Harry announces his engagement to American actress Meghan Markle. The wedding will take place in May 2018. Cuba and US relations remain strained after a mysterious sonic attack in Havana. The high-pitched noise causing several diplomats to report feeling sick. Despite Cuba denying any involvement, President Trump ordered several diplomats back to the US. Venezuela remains on the brink of economic collapse as people in the nation continue to revolt against the authoritarian Maduro regime. Terrorism continues to be a concern, with multiple attacks. Turkey feeling its effect on New Year's Day, when an ISIS gunman opened fire inside a crowded nightclub. 39 people were killed and more than 70 were injured. In March, an attacker drove his car into pedestrians on the Westminster Bridge, striking dozens of people that left 4 dead. A few months later, a man pledging allegiance to ISIS detonated a bomb outside the Manchester Arena during an Ariana Grande concert. 22 people were killed. And a few weeks later, a vehicle ran over multiple people on the London Bridge. 3 attackers then began stabbing people, leaving 8 dead. They were eventually killed by police. A van struck multiple people in Barcelona. At least 15 people died and 130 were injured. The attacker fled the scene but was tracked down by authorities and killed days later. Over 200 people were killed when a group of militants bombed a mosque in Egypt's volatile Sinai Peninsula. Although ISIS-inspired attacks occurred around the world, the terrorist organization continues to lose most of its territory in Syria and Iraq. Their de facto capital, Raqqa, is now in the hands of US-backed fighters. In politics, President Trump officially recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, despite objections from several world leaders. 2017 also saw President Trump making 2 foreign trips. His first overseas trip as Commander-in-Chief brought him to the Middle East, where he visited Saudi Arabia, Israel, Italy, the Vatican, and Belgium. His visit to the region came weeks after ordering a missile strike in Syria in response to a chemical attack directed by Bashar al-Assad. The president also took a foreign trip to Asia at the end of the year, with a major talking point centering on North Korea's continued nuclear weapon provocation. Also, dramatic video from the Korean Peninsula, as a North Korean soldier flees across the border into South Korea while facing gunfire. Looking ahead to 2018, Kim Jong-un's regime looks sure to remain at the top of President Trump's foreign agenda, and we'll be here to cover it all for you. In London, Benjamin Hall, Fox News.
On December the 28th, government forces liberated the villages of Ad-Dajjaj, Tamat al-Khalifa and Musharifah and reached the southern vicinity of the militant-held village of Abu Dali. Abu Dali is controlled by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, the Syrian branch of al-Qaeda, and is one of the key militant defense points in the area. If Abu Dali falls into the hands of the Syrian Arab Army, SAA, the militant defense may collapse in the entire area east of the town of Morak. Clashes in the area continued on December 29th. On December the 28th, the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, announced that their fighters had advanced on the ISIS-held town of Hajin in the province of Deir Zor. According to the SDF, 15 ISIS members were killed and a vehicle and motorcycle of the terrorist group were destroyed. The US-led coalition announced in an official statement released on December 27th that on December the 23rd, it and Machawi al-Thora, MAT, launched a military operation against ISIS in the Hama Desert around the Al-Tanaf base. MAT fighters secured several caves which had been used by ISIS to store weapons, explosives and communications equipment around Al-Tanaf. The coalition revealed that ISIS had used these positions in the Hama Desert to move to and from the Euphrates Valley. The US-led coalition statement confirms that ISIS maintains a presence in the Al-Tanaf area right under its nose, just as Russia and the SAA had claimed on many occasions. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the tremendous firepower of the Israeli Air Force and sent a warning to Iran and the Palestinian movement Hamas. The Prime Minister once again claimed that the Israeli leadership will not allow the forces of the Iranian army to establish themselves in Syria in order to harm us. According to experts, the US and Israel are in close coordination to limit the Iranian influence in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. However, so far, their activity has only led to the growth of the Iranian role in the region.
President Trump is calling China out. The defense secretary is promising to ramp up pressure, and Beijing is denying it all after evidence shows the country may have helped North Korea in violation of UN-imposed limits. Lucas Tomlinson with the details from the Pentagon.
Please raise their hand.
Defense Secretary Mattis predicts more actions against North Korea following the latest round of UN sanctions.
I think you will see increased pressure. What form that pressure takes in terms of physical operations is something that will be determined by the cognizant governments.
South Korea says it seized a cargo ship last month, claiming the vessel was illegally transferring 600 tons of oil at sea, an action prohibited by a UN resolution passed in September. The Hong Kong-flagged vessel Lighthouse Winmore entered a South Korea port on October 11th to fill up with oil. But instead of heading south to Taiwan as scheduled, the ship rendezvoused with a North Korean ship a week later. The transfer captured by U.S. spy satellites and released by the U.S. Treasury Department last month. It was only yesterday President Trump reacted on Twitter, quote, "Caught red-handed, very disappointed that China is allowing oil to go into North Korea. There will never be a friendly solution to the North Korea problem if this continues to happen." But before blaming the Chinese, President Trump was praising them just last month while visiting Beijing.
I thank President Xi for his recent efforts to restrict trade with North Korea. Together we have in our power to finally liberate this region and the world from this very serious nuclear menace. In terms of North Korea getting everybody together, I think their acts are all together. China has been excellent.
In a New York Times interview, President Trump says he's gone easy on China because the only thing more important to him than trade is war.
Chinese have been notorious for decades now for publicly agreeing to sanctions and then privately not enforcing them. So we're seeing yet another case of this again.
China accounts for 90% of North Korea's trade, but Beijing denies any involvement with this ship despite being registered in Hong Kong and leased to a company in Taiwan. Russian smugglers have also been accused of supplying North Korea with illegal oil at sea. Mike?
Lucas Tomlinson live at the Pentagon. Lucas, thanks very much.
North Korea has claimed that it's, quote, an invincible and responsible nuclear power that will enhance its nuclear capabilities in the future. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency says Pyongyang will not shift its policy on its nuclear weapons program, calling itself a new and strategic nuclear power state. The report also emphasized what North Korea has claimed to be its successful development of new weapons, including an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of reaching the mainland United States. North Korea has launched 60 missiles this year, also conducting its sixth and most powerful nuclear test to date in September.
I don't even know what she looks like. You know, it's just a blessing. It's just, I'm kind of nervous about meeting her. Hello, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas.
Floyd Miley had never met Stanisha Battle before, but her family has been on his mind for nearly 2 months. In November, her fiancé, Leandre Ridley, was shot and killed outside their home in Nashville, leaving her to raise their 5 children on her own. Miley and a friend took it upon themselves to make sure Ridley's children had gifts to open on Christmas morning, and he personally delivered them.
Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. I don't have much, but God loves us, and God is love.
Battle says the kids miss their dad.
He would take them to their practices, take them to their games, take them to school in the morning, pick them up in the evenings. He would do all of that. So, the kids, they really looked up to him.
Oh, thank you. I needed that. No one has been arrested in connection with Ridley's death. His family continues to mourn his loss and search for answers. But this Christmas, they were able to feel the love of others when they needed it the most.
Bless this family, Lord. In all Jesus' name, amen.